What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Tap In with Tezlyn Figaro. I am your host, Tezlyn Figaro, and I appreciate you tapping in with me. Let's get straight to it. Now, every year, someone is voting on the local, the state, and the national level. When I say local, I mean positions like city council, or maybe you're voting for your sheriff. The state level, like state representative or governor, or the federal level, which is your U.S. congressperson, which, by the way, that's every 2 years. People seem to forget about that. But during presidential election year, the conversation about voters heightens. Every year, voters are discussed, analyzed, picked apart. It's almost like everybody's trying to figure out, what do voters want? How will they move? How can we predict? And how can we engage those voters? When I say we, I'm talking about campaign organizers. Before I am a talking head, I am an organizer. I've worked on campaigns, about 50 under my belt, on the local, the state, and the federal election. So I'm always particularly interested in seeing how voters move. Now, this is where you'll hear every type of voter. White women. What do white women want? What do white suburban women want? What do white rural women want? What do white men want? What do young voters want? What do black voters want? What do college educated voters want? And so on and so on. And by the way, you can go to college and be black. A lot of times when they hear these different groups, they think, oh, well, you are just a part of one group. But there's no such thing as voters fitting into one box, meaning I can be a black woman, have a college education, and be between the ages of 18 to 45. Guess what else? There's also no such thing as people of color. That's one of my pet peeves. Voters of color. Certainly not all black people feel the same. So you got to know that all voters of color certainly don't feel the same. So when we're feel the same way about things. So when you're having these conversations on what people want, what has happened is people have started to build a lot of resentment of not feeling heard, feeling taken advantage of. And there's one particular group that I want to talk about today that has not been in the conversation, but has been voting and participating for the entire time. And that group is black men. Now, black Americans make up the base of the Democrat Party, which means the majority of black men and black women vote Democrat. Doesn't mean that all black people vote. Certainly doesn't mean that not all black people vote for Democrats, but it just means that based on the data that we have, the majority of the Democrat Party is the black vote. But you cannot assume that you understand the needs of all black people. Just because you voted for President Joe Biden in the last election doesn't mean that you understand why they voted, or did they feel they had no choice. And so these are the conversations that you're starting to see, as now they're talking about the black male voter, almost as if it's an endangered species. But the reality of it is black men have always been engaged. They've always been involved. You just didn't pay attention. I'm gonna give you some data right quick, and then I'm going to bring in my guests. In 2020, 87% of black men supported Joe Biden, although that was down from 95% with Barack Obama. It was 82% with Hillary Clinton in 2016. And then in 2016 and 2020, 94% and 95% of black women voted for Biden. Only 12% of black men voted for Trump, but that still was a huge increase to what we've seen in the past. No Democrat attracted less than 80% of black voters since the civil rights era. Now, there's a special place called Georgia, sweet Georgia. The black vote has become even more popular, proving that a southern state can turn blue if black voters are engaged. But because of the data I mentioned, people are assuming that all black people will just fall in line, and that's not the reality. Today, I want to discuss black men. I want to talk to two of my friends, black men from Georgia, Nyhiem, who is the president and co-founder of the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen and the political advocacy group Be the Power, and Torraine Walker, a journalist and brand strategist, and who's always talking about pay attention to black male voters. Now, I asked them to join me because they have strong opinions on black male voters. Follow them on Twitter. They're talking about it constantly. This is not a new conversation for us, but I wanted to bring you in on what we talk about behind the scenes and what we have talked about publicly. One of the things I always tell Torraine is I don't want to do all the talking. He has always invited me, Tess, come to the conversation and talk about black men. And I always say, well, the problem is you guys want to be heard. So I don't want to do all of the talking. I do want to kick the conversation off, but I want you to hear more from them than you do me. So welcome, guys.
Thank you, Tezlyn. How are you doing this afternoon? It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Pleasure was mine. Now, Nyhiem, I want to start with you. You made a tweet, and I'm going to read it. And it brought my attention. Is what made me say, you know what? We should do this show. There's an MSNBC show that they're focusing on. It's called Black Men in America, The Road to 2024. And in full transparency, I have a great relationship with Tremaine Lee, Charles Coleman. We have a great, the line is open. I have not talked to them about this particular show. Don't know what it's about. I saw the commercial just as many of you did. But you made a tweet and you said, they're going to try a new tactic this election cycle. They will put this in front of all of us, the weakest Black men that they can conjure up. Boule, college educated, yes men for the left wing of the hierarchy in the Democrat Party. These men will not tackle the issues that plague our men. They will mix up LGBTQ issues with a plethora of Black and brown, along with a bunch of people of color references. But we're not going to fall for it. We're going to expose every single aspect of it. Keep your sexuality. We don't want it, and we have never needed it. I thought that was really powerful. And I reached out to you, Nyhiem, and I said, well, I would caution you. And I don't, again, I have not watched it, and you have every right to have every opinion. But I said, well, brother, watch it first and, form an opinion, but you still have a right to feel the way you feel. And I was curious why you felt comfortable making such a profound statement about a special that hasn't been released, but for you to automatically know that your voice was not heard. I want to kick it off with that and give the mic to you. You're mute. You're on mute. Need to mute.
Hey, Tezlyn, thank you. Thank you for having me. This discussion is long overdue. It's an honor for me to be here and in the presence of such a beautiful hostess. Let me butter up the host real quick before we get started. So my tweet is based on an observation of a pattern that we see with the Democratic Party, where they put these individuals in front of us that many of us have never heard of. And instead of giving us something tangible, we're always given symbolism. I don't know these two brothers. I've never heard of these two brothers. That don't mean that they're not important. They may be important in their field. But if you're asking Black men what they want, it's not two men on MSNBC having discussions about things that we as the grassroots were having discussions about 10 years ago. I watched one of the segments and it was speaking about the racism and how tax audits is done. I was like, man, I knew about that 10 years ago. We're just having a discussion on it now. Why hasn't it been tackled when it was first broached, when the topic was first broached 10 years ago? So when we look at these types of individuals that are on mainstream media, we always get this Black people as the headline. But when you start to peel back all of the layers, you see references to people of color, Black and brown. We've seen that with the platform when Biden first ran in 2019, when he launched his campaign and they put out Biden's platform on their website. The headline read what they would do for Black people, but the body of the text talked about everybody else. We've seen the same thing with Stacey Abrams' platform when she decided that she was going to make this push for Black men. The headline said Black men, but the body of the text was about everybody else. We see the same thing with Kamala Harris and her recent push to attract Black men. Now, the headline says Black men and Black people, but when you read the body of the text, it is for everybody else. So we, as the grassroots, seeing this pattern and understanding it, understanding how the mainstream media operates, we know what to expect from this platform. And that's why I'm able to make such a bold prediction about what this type of programming will be about.
Torraine?
There's two things at play here, in my opinion. There's the fact that there's even a conversation to be had about what Black men and Black male voters are thinking about. And that conversation would not be happening if people who were not pundits and people who were not political comms people were not listening to the chatter on social media. All this stuff goes back to that. And I guarantee you, they're hearing some of the disgruntlement, they're hearing some of the frustration, and they're hearing just the chatter saying that we're not just going to accept the Democratic Party line and we want tangibles for our vote. Now, what that translates into remains to be seen. But they are listening, and I feel like right now there's a perfect opportunity for people who are focused and people who do have the best interests of Black male voters at heart to be able to push some things forward to say that this is what we want and these are the things we demand and this is what we're looking for. But I think that message has to be crystallized, because if not, what's going to happen is the mainstream media establishment that the brother Nyhiem spoke about, and the establishment in itself is going to capture that conversation, and they're going to fill that space with whatever they wanted to fill it up with, and it's not going to be anything that's going to be beneficial to Black men or even listen to Black men. That's my opinion on that.
Now, let me ask you this, because, we constantly keep saying that, it's not a monolithic. It's not a monolithic. I've listened to, I heard Nyhiem say, we as the grassroots, or we're not being heard. Is it fair to say that whatever, and I'm using that special, it's not even about that particular special because I haven't seen it yet, but it's just in general, as we're having these conversations. Is it fair to say that whatever issues they bring up, there's a sector of society that agrees with them as well? What I know when I hear we as the grassroots, because, we hear that a lot in our conversations, especially on social media, not everybody in the grassroots, would feel the same. Actually, when the term the grassroots, the Urban League, when you look at the definition of grassroots organizations, they call themselves grassroots, the Urban League, NAACP, grass tops. In political campaigns, when you're told to reach out to the grass tops and the grassroots, they're actually talking about a lot of these organizations who many people don't consider grassroots. So I want to make sure that we're using language so that people can understand exactly the voices that you guys are representing, and also, to be fair, that whoever they're interviewing are still Black men that have a position. But what I think is missing is not opening the door for the additional conversations at the table to understand that not all Black men are concerned with mass incarceration. Not all Black men are concerned with maybe other issues that they think, when we say criminalized, but there are some folks who are concerned with mass incarceration. Maybe some Black people are more Black men are concerned with economics. Maybe some are more concerned with healthcare. Maybe some are more, so I do you think it's fair to say, when you say they're not the voices of Black men, would you say that they're doing to you what you're doing to them, what people do to you, which is minimizing their voice? And if I'm not being fair, tell me.
Well, I'll say this. The segment that I seen with one of the brothers on MSNBC, he's having a conversation with the Black woman, right? If this segment, now, of course, our issues are our issues, but if this segment is designed, and I don't know how many other segments there are, that was the only one that I seen. But if this segment on MSNBC is designed to speak to the issues of Black men, you would think that, your first rollout would be a bunch of brothers that you're having this conversation with. I'm just saying. So when we say the grassroots over in my circle and nationwide network, we're talking about those of us who are pushing for reparative justice. Mm-hmm. And we are in the streets. We are actually in the grass. We are the ones that are talking to people every day. And we have these conversations among ourselves. We have online workshops. We have in-person workshops. And we're listening to everyday people. So there may be subsets of Black men that may not feel that this issue is, their concern, or that issue is their concern. But if you were to take a poll and ask what are our people's or Black men's overall concerns, well, then the number is going to come back overwhelming for the things that those of us in the reparations grassroots are harping on, right? So whether it's mass incarceration, whether it's how bad healthcare is for our women, because, and I just want to clarify this real quick, because I don't do the gender war thing. Yeah, our fight is for the Freedmen family, as we call it, right? The quote unquote Black family. And you can't build a family without the man at the head. And most of our people are socially conservative. This is something that Charles Blow, who's a uber liberal, right, has said in his book, The Devil You Know. He speaks to the fact that many Black people are in fact socially conservative. Our values are in line with a majority of American society's values. And so when you take the black man and you separate him from the black woman by focusing all of your energy, all of your funding, all of your grants and programs into black women, and then say during election cycles, we're going to politically elevate the black women and then exclude the black men, you're going to have a dissension. You're going to have a rise in those who feel disaffected, and they're going to start to move away. And this is why you're starting to see that groundswell of black men going to the Republican Party, really Donald Trump, if we're just being honest, because they feel that
they're going out of resentment, or should it be they're going because of those policies that are important?
Well, that's something that can be unpacked, right? And I don't want to suck up the time. Maybe we could get back to that, but that's something that definitely needs to be unpacked. But I will say that a part of it is resentment. A part of it is okay, as black men, who's listening to us? Because when Roland Martin interviewed Ice Cube before Biden won, he ambushed Ice Cube with Alicia Garza at the end of the interview. And Alicia Garza basically told Ice Cube, brother, you're going to have to get in back of the line. And Ice Cube said, wait a minute, I'm not getting in nobody's line. You see, so there's this thing where you're saying we have to forget us walking in together. They're saying, no, we're going to put the black woman in front and you black men have to get behind her and then y'all can come into the door.
Now, that's
where the problem.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought that point up, and I want you, Torraine, to jump in here in a second, but I do want to speak to that because when we're talking about, and again, this is just from an operative side, so you guys know, and the audience may not know, I was a racial justice director for Bernie Sanders, so I worked on the ground, I've worked for city races, state races, and when we are looking in the voter file, when we are looking in what they call the Voter Action Network, and we're trying to figure out who to pinpoint, I agree with you that black women have been elevated because the numbers are there to substantiate the elevation. No different than, and it doesn't make it right, but I just want to speak from an operative standpoint that if I have to decide, if I only have, and this goes into the problem of organizing, which I've been saying for years, if I only had one, they start campaigns way too late. Look at what's happening now with Joe Biden. They just started campaigning 6-7 months away. So one, they start campaigning. Let's just not even talk about the president's led. Let's just talk about the state. Let's talk about your state in Georgia, Stacey Abrams. So when you're starting at the last minute, and if I have to go into a store and I only have a certain amount of time to grab what I can get, I'm going to grab the things closest to me, what we call closest to the dollar. And so if that black woman, based on stats, has been more dependable as a voter for me, those are where the resources are going to go, whether it is the Hispanic community, whether it is women, whatever it is. Those limited resources, well, by the way, they certainly do not fund all black people the way that they should. But a lot of that has to do with the timing, the lack of organizing, the reduced funds, and the little bit of money that we do get. How am I going to use that to get a return on my dollar? When you look at Vivek Ramaswamy, who, I interviewed him on the Breakfast Club, he spent $30 million of his own money. Only 8,500 people came to the polls. That math ain't mathing. So when you have a certain amount of money and you're saying, how am I going to target to get who comes here? The Republican Party's done a great job of saying, we're going to target the Hispanic community. They put 30 different community centers in the Hispanic community in Georgia to make sure they were bringing in Hispanic voters. So not making an excuse. I just want people to know, where the family to know where the areas need to be corrected. Because yes, when you see on TV that everything's about black women, you do feel resentment, like in any relationship. If I'm talking about politics is a relationship, dating, being engaged, and married. So if I'm excluding one person out of the relationship and everybody's talking about how I'm such a good wife, and never talking about the man, or vice versa, he's such a good husband, without recognizing that a wife supports him, then yes, resentment starts. And what happens? Now you start to creep on a relationship. Well, you ain't paying me no attention, so I might as well get it over here. Well, you're not paying me no attention, so I might as well go over here and date somebody else. And what does that do? That hurts the family. Because now if you're moving in resentment, then I don't know if I can consider that true leadership, because it may not be doing what's best for the family. I feel your point. I just like to give the analogy on how this resentment, but it is also up to us. I'm not going to shut up because I said I was going to shut up, but I am the host. I got some opinion. It also comes down to, as a black woman in this space, when you mention Ice Cube, people mention it all the time. I've reached out to Ice Cube myself. I am that woman to say, hey, Cube, you can't just start this and then walk away, because the reality of it is he walked away from it. He walked away from it. So when I'm saying, Cube, I'm here, I'm available, and everybody say, well, I don't blame Ice Cube, I would have walked away too. No, I do though, because now you got people excited, and now Cube, come on, come holler at the homegirl. Let me help get people engaged. I know that that's not what you do year round, but hello, I'm here. So there are people who are saying, no, that's why you guys are here. Hey, I'm a black woman. Every time I get a microphone, I'm sharing it with somebody. There is no gender divide. But sometimes, Nyhiem, that's not recognized as well. Now, I can either be resentful and say, you know what, they ain't paying no attention to me, they ain't trying to work with me, or I can continue to keep pushing the line, as I say, and continue to keep trying to build and restore our family. Torraine? And Torraine, speak to in Georgia, too, about black men, because I want to make sure that we're specifically, talking about black men in Georgia also.
No, you made some very good points, but to your point about Georgia, the conversation that they're having and the point you made about they're catering mostly to black women, that's true, but they're also listening to the chatter that's going on. And I'll give you an example. When Stacey Abrams launched her second campaign, the one that unfortunately was not successful last time, she started that campaign with a very good ad that I thought. She did an ad that she shot in Fellowship, which is Cam Newton's cigar bar in the middle of downtown Atlanta. She was sitting in a chair, and the chair was very masculine looking, leather with the studded outline and everything. And there were black men around her. Some of them were famous, some of them were just working class men, and some of them were businessmen who were successful in Atlanta. And she was listening to these men talk. And when I saw that ad, I'm like, okay, she's going on the right track, because she's recognizing that there's a black male voter base that will get behind her if she just speaks to them and sits down with them in their element. She did that one ad and nothing else happened. So I'm saying that to say that they're aware that there's a black element, there's a black male voter element that wants to be spoken to like men, and they want to be spoken to in their element. But they just did what happens all the time. They brought in a lot of consultants from outside the country, from outside of the city, and also outside of the culture, who was saying,
outside of being black. Let's just go ahead and name it. Let's just name it. A lot of the black outreach, yes, ran by white folks, including on the Republican and the Democrat side. Let's just talk about it for what it is. I know you want to be nice, say outside of the culture. No, white folks be running these campaigns. Let's just talk about it. Let's just name it.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a couple of them, and so I'm like, okay, that looks good. And then I turned around and she completely abandoned that strategy, and she started going over to these white suburbs who were already in the bag for her. She didn't really need to go campaign with them. I told the guy who reached out to me and said, what do we need to do to win in Georgia? Which I really shouldn't have to do. He was from New York. And I'm saying, look, if to win in Georgia, you got to go to the block. Just like you do in any other product, you got to go to the barbershop. You got to go to where black people live, and you got to show them who you are so they can know you. Just having your name recognition is not enough. And when we're talking specific about black men, you have to tailor your image to things that black men identify with. And in Georgia, that is homelessness, because you go downtown in Atlanta, all you see is homeless black men. That's economics, because every man in general, but black men want to be able to feed themselves and take care of their family. That's universal across the board. Every black man is concerned about police brutality. They want to be sure that they can go out of their door and come home just like everybody else without having to worry about their life being taken. And those are things that could have been said, but none of that was said. It was all about going out to the suburbs and playing with dogs and doing this sort of imagery that doesn't speak to black men in general.
Playing with dogs?
Yeah, there were videos they were taking when she was out there doing trick or treating with like little kids who were not black and stuff like that. I'm like, what does that have to do with the concerns of black people in Torraine? You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. It just doesn't make sense. And when you have messaging like that, and you're a black woman, and you want to reach a black base, which you say is the base of the party, what does that do? And it's double messaging, and people are going to check out of that. That's what happened.
Hey, Torraine, who did Brian Kemp sit down with in the black community? Killer Mike. Yep. You see? And here's
what's crazy about that. Killer Mike, somebody, I think Kemp had made a comment about black businesses or something like that, and then Killer Mike reached out to him on Twitter and said, hey, if you want to see how real black businesses look like, come down to Edgewood, we'll check you out. Brian Kemp reached out to him on a Friday and said, I'll come down. That Monday, he came down to Edgewood in the hood and sat in the chair at Killer Mike's swag shop and talked with that man.
And they killed Killer Mike for that. Like, let's just talk about, because see, when we say, well, we want you to talk to black people, we want both sides to talk to black people. And then when you do, which Killer Mike's talked on all sides, black media in particularly, like, let's just talk about, because my thing is, when we're having problems on how we need to move, to me, when black media is saying, this is wrong, it was black media that drug Killer Mike and saying, how dare you sit down with him? How dare you sit down? Ignoring that he sat down with everybody, ignoring that the door was open to Raphael Warnock, and he eventually came, begrudgingly, ignoring that he's had these conversations, ignoring that Mike Again, you know, that's a brother of mine, so I'm always gonna give him a plug. But ignoring that he owns several businesses, that he actually has an economic interest when you talk about the state of Georgia. And you guys mentioned something about economics that is largely ignored. It's almost as if, and they do this with black voters, period, but certainly with black men. You made a point about black men want to take care of their family, regardless of what y'all hear in social media about black men don't work and black men don't have money. Black men ain't. The reality of it is, a part of a man's manhood is the ability to provide. And the Democrat Party does a terrible job on economics, period. Whether they're talking to all voters, they lean on social issues. That's the first go ahead. The first thing is social. Then somewhere down the line, they talk about economics. That's even in respect to black women. But they certainly don't do it with black men. And that is what's been at least compelling when you start talking about the money. When now you're leaning, I'm not talking about a conservative, because conservative is your social issues. Republican is more of your pocketbook issues. How am I going to make more money when I own the business? Black men are black business owners because they may not get ahead in society, in a traditional workplace. And so those are the conversations that people are not having. And it's because, again, the typical things to talk about, mass incarceration. Guess what? Mass incarceration is my most important issue. And I've never been arrested. So don't assume that because that's an issue of mine and that I must have been arrested. And don't assume that every black man has a criminal record, because they don't. And so all of those conversations have been missed in my opinion.
And that's something that happens all too often, because again, a lot of the people that they're listening to and a lot of the people who are in a lot of these politicians' ears are completely disconnected from the grassroots and from the rank and file and the poor and working class. The black people that they listen to all too often come from backgrounds, that they come from places that they don't understand, that you have to go to a family and you have to go to talk to black women, which they already have down. We know that, but you got to talk to black men as well. If you go in the black community, I don't care if it's the richest neighborhood or the dirt poor neighborhood, you're going to see black men and black women. You're going to see the black bus driver. You're going to see the black mailman. You're going to see the black garbage man. You're going to see the black doctor. And all those people have opinions and all those people have issues. But if you only speak to one side of the culture, you're going to completely miss a whole different 50% of your voter base who's going to be completely turned off or feel neglected and ignored. And you can't afford to do that, especially in 2024. What's going to happen in 2024 in Georgia and across the board, these races are going to come down from the local to the presidential level, are going to be neck and neck, and they're going to be very tight. The Democrats cannot afford to alienate one half of their voter base like they've been doing over the past 6 to 10 years. It's not going to work.
And I want to throw this out here just as food for thought. You know, when we talked about the resentment in the black family, and I want to make sure, because, you know, I'm big on that, making sure people know the reality, that this gender war that you may hear with people online is not the reality. Black women and black men ride harder together than any other race. We must put that out there. If we look at and that includes voting, because even if we look at the data and we look at how white women were with Trump and their white men in 2016, in 2018, white women started moving away from Trump and white men stayed with Trump. If you look at what's getting ready to happen now with abortion, white women are splitting the household and saying, we're going to move over here because of abortion, while white men are still staying with Trump. Matter of fact, when Matt Gaetz said a couple of weeks ago, we welcome the Juan and Julios, which was a derogatory statement. But what he was saying is, we welcome the Hispanic and black men. Well, I got news for you, Matt. Black men and black women, we are together. So don't try to accept that. That's very important to me, that when you talk about the black vote and you talk about how we're moving, contrary to what you believe on social media, the reality is more black men and black women marry each other, have homes together more than any other race. So it's also up to us to make sure that those realities are out there. It's up to us to say, no, hold on, wait a minute, leave the door open for my brother. I'm talking about in the media space. It's also up to us. It's up to the Cube to say, let me go partner with my sister. Not everybody's shutting the door on you. It's also up to me to say, hey, I got a microphone. Let me make sure my brother's in, because this is the perception that they're seeing. But I do want people to know that the perception is not the reality, that black people, although we vote together, it doesn't mean we should be taken advantage of. What it means is you need to speak to the issues that affects that household as black men and black women, and how can we elevate and how can we build ourselves up. And we also have to be careful to understand that not everybody's issue is the same in that household. I may have $100,000 in college debt. It's okay for me to want my debt cleared, but it's also okay, Nyhiem, for you to say, yo, let's get the debt cleared by paying the reparations. And so I think it's also important for us among ourselves to make sure that we're leaving room for everybody at the table. And that's where I see the interference comes in. And a lot of these operatives, they play on that. The progressive movement in particular, they play on that. Oh, that's the boomers. Oh, that's the, oh, that's the older voters. Oh, that's they put a divide between black people. And I'm very clear about let black people sort out our own business. We'll fight among each other. Like when you mentioned Roland, you and Roland can fight it out. We don't need nobody else to come in there and tell. Like, let us fight out our own issues or discuss our own issues and find out how we can make space for each other. But what we can't allow is these operatives to come in and create more division. People who are in the room, including you, black candidates, when you're in the room and your black outreach team is not black outreach, I have a problem with that. When you're not spending money on media, I have a problem with that. When you're not engaging everybody, not just at the barbershop, but everybody outside the barbershop, the church, the boule, the hood, the rappers, the whoever, when you're not leaving voice for everybody, I have a problem with that. And that comes down to the candidates who are choosing a lot of these operatives and allowing these operatives to create this division. I don't want to put it all on us because it's not. We're not the ones signing the check and decide who's going to get outreach and who's not.
Mm-hmm. There was a federal report that was published in 2020 titled Income and Poverty in the United States 2019. And the study was looking at the statistics from the year 2018. And this is 2 years before COVID. And it showed that 42% of all black men ages 25 and 34 earned less than the $25,100 needed to provide for a family of four, right? Like, that's not enough. And if they were listening to black men, they would understand that. There was an interview done by Roger Wilkins, a civil rights giant back in the days. And in his NPR interview, I have this quote. He says, "We hear people talking about black families falling apart, but we don't hear anybody talking about putting black men to work, giving black families the economic wherewithal to stay together and raise their children." At the end of the day, it all boils down to the money. There was a summit that was held, the Freedmen's Bank Summit. And those of us that's in the reparations movement, we were up in arms about it because, again, we find they're using the plight of our people to give money to everybody else. So we watched all 5 hours of the live stream. All of especially Hispanic people got up there and spoke about how these funds that were being placed in things like CDFIs, I can't remember what CDFI means at the time, at the moment, were being used by these immigrant communities. And one of the people that spoke, sound like he just learned English 5 years ago, spoke about how $30 million from this specific program, from the Freedmen's Bank summits that they were putting into these CDFIs, went and helped immigrant businesses across America, and how those immigrant businesses hired 1,000 new immigrants, people that just came into the country. There was something called the Cuban, what was it called, man? The Cuban, it was a Cuban program. I can't think of the name of it right now, of 1966. Mm-hmm. And this offered $16,000 for Cubans that just came over, $15,000 to $16,000, all types of rental assistance, et cetera, et cetera. In the 60s, our people were going through it.
You're talking about the wet foot, dry foot policy that they had in Florida. I was a kid in Florida. I remember that. It was basically, if you could escape or get away from Castro's
That's Cuba, right.
If you put your foot on dry land in Florida, then you automatically qualify for whatever benefits you could get from the state of Florida. That was the thing.
The Cuban Adjustment Act is what it's called. I'll have to pull it up. The Cuban Adjustment Act. Now, if you look at Chicago, they're giving these migrant families $15,000 in rent, right? So you find a home, and the Daily Mail reported on this. You find a home, they pay the rent up to $15,000. I did my own math. That's about 6 months of rent at market rate. Now, think about if that type of capital infusion had went into black communities. This would give black men and black families a head start to be at the table and say, look, I can finally do the things that I want to do in raising and building up my family. I say all that to say that there's opportunities politically. I don't care which side of the aisle it comes from, but because our people vote for the Democrats, they have the opportunity to now hear what we have to say. And just to go back to how we opened, we didn't ask for nobody to sit on MSNBC. We asked for policies to help change our economic conditions. If you can spend all that money on newly arrived migrants, most of them illegal, cross the border illegally, what problem do you have making the same type of infusions of capital into these neighborhoods where your day one citizens live?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would love to have you guys back to talk about the migrant crisis, to talk about immigration, why that is a talking point that you're now seeing Black people talk about, when just a couple of years ago, if you brought it up at all, you were considered canceled and racist. And even Joe Biden is now talking about an immigration problem. But there is a conversation that Black people have been having about this for a minute that has been largely ignored. And you just laid out some key points that I would love to unpack again, to kind of get into the economics of it, and to give you an opportunity to teach Nyhiem about, reparations and why that is important, and why, people who are talking about that are not just, crazy, that there's some real substance behind this, and Black men wanting to provide for their family, contrary to popular belief, and the house not a handout. So as we close, I think you laid out the things in what you just said, Nyhiem, on what you think is being missed, because I know we only have a few minutes, but I want Torraine, if you can give me some closing thoughts, and even Nyhiem, just give me a couple of points on closing thoughts on, what message do you want them to hear now? Meaning, what should they be doing? They can either, you made it very clear, you said they either gonna do it or they gonna lose at the polls. I think you've been very clear about, how you feel. What do you want them to hear? Because I am gonna send this over to my friends, who did the special. I do want them to know, I would love to have a larger conversation. They may feel like, hey, we've talked to people that feel the same way as you. And not everybody is always gonna be invited to everything. I just always want to do my part to make sure that, people, at least in my circle, are heard. So what are some closing thoughts that you guys have, and I'll let you get the final word.
To be honest with you, what Black men want, and I know we can't speak for all Black men, but I'm gonna be just very direct as I can be. Black men want to be heard, and they want more than optics. A lot of times the messaging that Black voters get is basically just optics, fish fries, and I've been vocal about that. Fish fries and pop blocking and dancing and all that stuff is cool, but the way you reach out to Black men is with policy. And there's an old saying that I think everybody in the room has heard. I hear it ain't about what you tell me, it's the way you treat me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a Black male, which I am, and I'm a voter, which I am, and every time I try to get my needs met, or I try to tell you that the things that are important to me are economics, but you ain't got no money for that. If I say that we need to have a conversation about reparations with some real policy behind it, but you ain't got no money for that. But every time I look at the news, I see money going to Zelensky in Ukraine. I see money going to Israel to help fund the genocide. I see money going to all these people like Nyhiem talked about, who are coming over here, and they're getting basically a leg up that the average Black person who's been here 400 years can't get. When I see the way you pull money out for certain things that you want to pull them out for, but you can't do anything for the people who've been here and been loyal American citizens, that affects my vote a whole lot more than what you're coming out to tell me, oh, you got one Black first in this job, or you got one Black woman in this job, or you finally elected one first Black person to the Supreme Court. That doesn't affect my daily life as much as my economic well-being and the things I see going towards that. So that's what I would tell people. Also, we can't just be an afterthought, and we have to have conversations, and we have to have policies specifically for Black men, just like you have specific policy for everybody else, every other gender, every other sexual orientation, every other ethnic group. There needs to be specific policy platforms for Black men so they can raise themselves up and their families up.
Mm-hmm. Nyhiem?
I mean, I can sum it up with, first and foremost, our young men want to be able to create families. Our men that have families want to be able to take care of their families. How do you get a gender divide? When there's not enough resources, and that woman is looking at that man a certain type of way, and things, that economic crunch is coming in, and he can't necessarily do the things that he wants to do to provide for his family. This create rifts. This is just this is really dealing with the laws of nature. whereas the male has to provide. And if our opportunities have been
Stifled.
stifled, that's a perfect word, over generations, it creates a buildup of disadvantages, and the disadvantages that we have now, and we can't climb up the rung of economic mobility in this country because of it, and we're always asked to start from scratch. So you can't just tell me education, because that's not going to put food on the table. Even if my children are going to better schools, we need infusions of capital, and the only way to do that is by crafting, as Torraine said, policies to address us in the same way that they address migrants, in the same way, as Torraine said, they can send money to Ukraine and Israel. So we just want to be able to take care of our families.
Maybe that need to be our next show. Maybe we need to go ahead and just put the relationship conversation on the table, because when I hear you guys, and I completely agree, but I do just want to say, you know, for Black women, I do want guys to recognize, not you, just in general, that Black women, it ain't been easy for us either. You know, we have to deal with being Black. We have to deal with being a woman. We have to fight Karen on the job and Ken on the job. And statistically speaking, Black men do better, make more money than Black women, even though you hear the opposite, that Black women are doing better. But overall, Black men, if I'm in a room, because sexism does exist, y'all do realize that, right? Like, that is a real thing. So, and I'm not, I'm not one to say which is worse, because we know which is worse. Race is, period. And to be clear about that. But I do want to be clear that if the resentment that's coming from the other side, and maybe we need to have this conversation, the resentment that's coming from the side of Black women is like, okay, we still have to fight that same corporate ladder. We still have to get looked over for jobs. We still have to have more education than Karen and Ken, and we still get looked over, and we still try to hold our man down. Statistically speaking, Black women hold Black men down. We give that leg up. We do this, we do that, and we don't get that credit either. You know, so we need to, I guess we need to come on back and talk about, like, let's talk about this relationship. When go ahead, Torraine.
But you know what, Tezlyn, the thing of it is, there are conversations that need to be had about some of the disconnects and some of the things that go on between Black men and Black women. And I say this a lot. Those conversations are valid, but the problem is the absolute worst people have the mic on these conversations, and they create dysfunction, and they some of the people, and what they do is they take their trauma and they take their resentment and they spill that out into the wider world, where it's not sisters like you who are able to have that conversation. It's like the worst people granted, so nothing really gets done. It becomes a shouting match, and then nothing really gets resolved, and the resentment gets worse and worse.
That's absolutely right. And I tell people, your real life, I say this all the time. Anytime I see something on social media about all Black men, it was a tweet today, it was just a regular, not politically related, but Shaq had said, never open up to a woman. And I went in there, and we see those conversations a lot on social media, and I always say that your experience with any gender, man or woman, is a direct reflection not of the people you've been intimate with, but everybody in your life. I can't possibly say that all Black men ain't shit when I got a Black daddy, rest in peace, a Black grandfather, two Black grandfathers, paternal and maternal grandfathers, uncles, and my ex-husband, shout out to him, one of the best, set the bar on what it means to be a provider. How can I possibly write off a whole gender and ignore those Black men in my life? How can you say all women are trash? All women can't be trusted. Never open up to a woman. That means don't open up to your mama, your grandma. Nobody in your family has been a noble woman. Like, this is deep. Like, we really got to have this conversation. When we're talking about all women and all men, even a moment ago, Nyhiem, I didn't take offense when you said education don't put food on the table. It has for me. I have 3 degrees. So when people hear that, and the resentment happens with that. Like, people are like, well, what do you mean? You mad because I got a degree? Like, but no, I know what you meant, because I know you coming in love, and that's your opinion, because there's conversations about college degree, debt, council debt, and people have felt left out of that conversation. And like Torraine, you made the point. It's up to us, the grown folks, to show both sides of it. Because if I got $100,000 in college debt, which I do, by the way, and I'm your wife, and we need to get rid of that debt in order to move forward, in addition to that policy that you're talking about that's designed for Black men, in addition to other programs that maybe everybody don't want to go to college, tech jobs, taking care of our children in high school, which, by the way, that was what Killer Mike was talking about with Governor Kemp, and actually got that taken care of in Georgia. It was one of the things he got off. So I think it's just important that we just make sure we don't become the people that are speaking in absolutes, and we have the responsibility, to kind of peel the onion and get some understanding. And that's what I'm hoping this show.
If I could just make one quick
Yes.
clarification, what I meant, right? So you have a static family, right?
Yes.
Husband, wife, 2.5 children. That's how the statistic goes. You can't come to me with the policy. What I meant was you can't come to me with a policy about all you need is education.
Right.
Because that doesn't put food on the table right there in the moment. Yeah, sure, my children could grow up if they get a good education, but in the moment, that doesn't address my needs. It's a top, like when we bring up the reparations conversation.
You mean address whose name? Are you talking about from you personally or to the black man? Because if I'm a teacher, school teacher, you have to have a college degree to be a school teacher. May not make a lot of money, but my sister's a school teacher in Georgia. Literally, she's been working for 25 years school teacher. You have to have a college degree. When her husband has had layoffs, ups and downs in corporate America, that school teaching job is what kept food on the table. You have to have a college degree. So is that
what I meant, remember the statistic I showed earlier that in 2018, a federal study showed that 42% of all black men the ages 25 and 34 earned less than $25,100. So if you have a young family at the age of 25, it's you, your wife, and your son or your daughter, and you're struggling, you're poor because this is what you're earning on average.
You're saying they don't need to be telling him, hey, just go to college. I see what you're saying.
Don't come to me saying nothing about education. I'm 25 past school. I just need better pay, right? I need infusions of capital for the business ideas that I want to start. The banks keep turning me away. I built my credit score up to 720. The banks still discriminated against me and told me that Joshua because he's white with the 620 credit score is more trustworthy than I am with the 720 credit score. You see what I'm saying?
No, I'm glad you clarified that because what I'm saying is what I'm hearing from sisters with education. They didn't hear that clarification. They just heard what you said the first time, and then they get resentful. And they're saying, "Are you talking about?" Because we've had the conversation about student debt, and it comes off as resentful, as anti. Education, shitting on me basically because I went to college and I'm bringing that into the household. Like I'm still bringing it to you. I do blue collar men. So my ex-husband was a mechanic, but he also paid for me to go to school. So somebody was going to school, somebody was turning wrenches. So what I'm saying is the resentment. People hear something other than that. And that's why I'm saying we got to be careful. And how we're using absolute terms and making sure that because when I stomp hard for mass incarceration and they get on me, you criminalizing all black people, you saying all black people go. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I grew up in an era in the 94 crime bill where I watched entire generations go to jail. I'm saying I done put money on the homies' books and I know how it's affected their life. So that's something that's important, to me. So I'm just saying, as we're having this conversation, I'm just pointing out where the resentment is coming from, on the black woman side. But I want to point out, when I say the black woman side, I'm talking about talking heads. I ain't talking about the reality. Because the reality is we're together. People got to know that, black people are together. Y'all stop thinking we ain't together. Because if you ain't together, that means you come from a disconnected place and you don't understand. We can have our fights as family, but at the end of the day, we still family. And I'm down to work with anybody that has true love for black people. Go ahead, Torraine, and I will close it up.
All right. And Tezlyn, see, here's the thing. What you're talking about is the reality for most black people. That's how my grandparents grew up. My grandfather was a carpenter. He built houses. He would build a house from the foundation to the roof. My grandmother was a teacher. And, this was in the 1930s up until the 1980s and 90s when they passed on. That was the reality because there weren't that many opportunities for black people out there. Most black women, if they had a profession, they were either nurses or school teachers.
Or doing hair, like my grandmother.
Yeah, most black women did manual labor of some sort.
That's right.
But they pooled their resources together and they built a family and they built a legacy of a family off of that sort of stuff. The way people are thinking now is that I got to be over here in my cell as a black woman. I ain't nobody looking out for me as a black man, so I got to get out here on the block and hustle the way I can and stuff like that. And those two things, when you got those two things that are working against each other instead of working together, you're going to have people who become, like you said, the pundits and the talking heads who grow up either bitter or they grow up frustrated because they don't have a partner who they can look over and look at and everything. And that's the part we need to get into that too. And so you take that frustration and you turn it into policy, and that policy turns into like ongoing legacies of people who are just dysfunctional and nothing really gets solved in the black community because you got two different genders who are at war with each other when we should be building with each other. And that's the fear.
That's right. And people are playing on that. Like I said, when Matt said Juan and Jamal and Julio come over here.
Jamal, yeah.
Yeah, what about Shaniqua and Tasha? Because we going where they going. So again, but the black man that didn't hear that, the Jamal that didn't hear that, oh man, I want to go where I'm loved. Don't everybody want to go where they love? To your point, Nyhiem, everybody, hey, you're hearing me over here. I want to go where you hear me, even if it ain't right. I'm gonna go to my side piece house, even though I know it's gonna break up the relationship. I know she ain't better. Y'all know I love doing relationship metaphors. You know she ain't better than your wife. You know, but I just want to be loved on for a little bit. That's what's happening in politics. It's not that people are saying Republican policies are all Republican policies are better or who better Trump by, because you don't give a damn about neither one of them. But just using the relationship analogy and when people want to be heard. I just want you brothers to know that not all black women, like, we want to be heard too, you know, and I understand the game that has been played in the operative space has been the same game that has been played to divide us for the last 400 years. It's not always the individual, you know, that you see.
No, and I appreciate you saying that, because those are things that need to be heard. I think most people, when you come to politics, or even to use your relationship metaphor, even voting in electoral politics is there's an emotional aspect to that. And if you can hit people in an emotional appeal, especially us, because, you know, we tend to be an emotional people. We tend to move our vibes sometimes. Sometimes that vibe can be to your benefit and it can be to your detriment. And if that vibe that you feel for that one moment that you feel like you're being heard doesn't really benefit you down the long run, what good was that vibe? So we got to think a little bit more critically about certain things.
And I want to push back a little bit on that, because, you know, I know that I'm not saying you do that, but that's another talking point that I hear a lot of conservatives do. You know, black people are emotional. Well, right now, white women are emotional because they're voting all for abortion. All that, according to the data, they're leaving their men behind to get abortions. So they vote on emotion too. Politics always touches the heart first. They voted for Trump based on so all voters, you're touching on. It's a real strategy. Me, you, us. Talk about me. Talk about you. Talk about us. It's not just that black people are just so disconnected and just so emotionally challenged that we're not trying to be critical in any way. I think at the end of the day, like we do in most things, we try to deal with the cards that were dealt with us, that were given to us. And so people had to hold their nose and vote for Biden. It wasn't because he just the best thing since sliced bread, or even Trump for that matter. It's just a simple fact. This was my only choice. This was all I had. No different than I didn't like that job, but I had to take that job, and I had to listen to him talk crazy, and I had to get browbeat at the job, but I took it because I got to provide for my family. So I think as black people, we take the cards that were dealt with us because we weren't born with a full deck. And I'm not disagreeing with you said, Torraine. I just want to make sure they know. Stop saying, you know, well, we dealing with the card. When if I'm only coming to the table with half of the cards, I'm playing whatever I got. And I don't think that lies in emotion. I think that lies in the lack of resources and the ability, you know, the inability to be able to play whatever card I want to play, whether it's economic, household, you know, whatever it is. But I do respect your point. I don't want to discount it. I'm always trying to find ways to make sure we get lifted back up, that don't get it twisted. Like, we are thinking through this.
Oh, absolutely.
We just don't have the power.
My last message before we get up off of here to the Democratic Party.
Like 4 times, but
we done said that 4 times. Don't come around. Don't bring out Obama talking about go get cousin Pookie off the couch. Don't have Roland Martin, like he came to Athens, Georgia, when he was stumping for Joe Biden, telling women, don't give your husband none if he don't get off the couch and go vote.
That's crazy. Can I pause right there? I just say that, and we ain't doing that. That's a bridge too damn far. I just want to be clear about that.
I got the video on my Twitter wall.
Like, I don't know what y'all on. Who said? I don't know why they be.
Roland Martin said that. I'm gonna send you the video. I got it on my Twitter.
I know there was one female activist, the feminist, Professor Crunk. I remember when she said it.
Yeah.
But now that's a bridge too damn far down. What we ain't gonna do is stop the sex based on that ain't we ain't gonna. Y'all got power, but not that much power. Right. Anyway, I'm sorry I had to pause. But Roland Martin can't tell me. Nobody else can't tell me when to give my man something, not something. That's the one thing we definitely gonna agree on in our house. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Nyhiem. That threw me off.
No, I'm good. That's it. Don't come around with that cousin Pookie. Go get your cousin off the couch.
And guess what? I'm with cousin Pookie all the time because I am the little whisperer. So if you're going to be with cousin Pookie, rock with cousin Pookie out. Now that's what frustrates me. You know,
bring some policies for cousin Pookie.
That's right. Get the policy. But also, do you even know Cousin Pookie though?
No,
That's
they
what I
That's
don't.
want
right.
to know. Because
They
now you
don't.
got all of these pundits. You see them. Oh man, they so hip hop now. Hat to the back and posing. I don't want to say no names, but it's been some pundits that came out here lately and acting like they just so down with the call. Come on, girl. We see straight through it. Knock it off.
And
So if
Tezlyn, to
you
your
gonna be
point,
with Cousin Pookie, I'm gonna need you to be with Cousin Pookie all year round. Look out for Cousin Pookie. Send Cousin Pookie $20. Make sure he know he got a voice. Is Cousin Pookie calling you? The homies definitely call me from every side of. Hey, what's happening? You this, that. Like, be engaged. Don't just tell Cousin Pookie get your ass off the couch. I'm telling Cousin Pookie to say no. I'm gonna be where I'm at. Like I've been being where. Why you ain't been checking on me this whole time? So again, it's our responsibility as talking heads on this mic, organizers, to make sure that we're redirecting this conversation. But thank you for putting all that shade out there. We'll make sure that I'm sure you obviously have a
wow.
problem with Roland Martin, but
I do. I
this,
do.
because I know people don't like Roland Martin. And I do want to say this, that one thing that he has always talked about is how this is where I hope that maybe there can be some agreement. How organizers, operatives do not spend money with black media. They just do not. They don't invest in him. They don't invest in my show. They don't invest in they just absolutely do not. And so I think one of his points about that is critically important, even if it's an opposing view of Nyhiem.
I agree with him on that.
Yeah.
I
You know
agree
what
with him
though?
on that.
Here's the thing about that, because I've been on this show quite a few times, and when it comes to business and it comes to things like that, he is very much on point about that, because it is true. These pundits and a lot of these political campaigns, they will give $500,000 to a non-black outreach program before they'll give $20,000 to a black outreach program that's trying to do the same thing. But here's the point: even with the outreach and even with the messaging, Naeem, you raised a really good point. That's another issue that black men are going to have to really stand up for. And I gave a shout out to brothers who have been doing this. That level of condescension that you hear from a lot of these pundits and a lot of these conversations about black men, that has got to stop, because you hear more and more black men saying they're tired of that, and they're tired of being talked down to, they're tired of being disrespected, they're tired of being told to shut up and vote. There was a whole hashtag called Blame Black Men that happened in 2020, because every single pundit and every single entertainer was like, shut up, black men, and go out there and vote and quit asking them questions like we some slave on the plantation and stuff. And I'm telling you, black men respond to policy, to your point, Tezlyn, not to clarify my point about emotionalism and everything. Black men, black women too, but black men will respond if you come to a podium with a notepad and a folder and tell them this is our policy for you and this is how you talk to us and everything. You don't have to get out there with the dancers. You do not have to go dig up some rapper from 1995 and put him out there for us to listen to. That's all beautiful and everything, but we respond to conversation and policy and respect the same like every other group does. They don't go to they don't go to Latino communities out there with a mariachi band. They don't go out there waving flags for everybody else. They talk to them with policy. That's what we
That's
need.
right.
That's what we need. We need to be respected. That's just the bottom line. We're tired of being disrespected and talked down to.
Ain't no cousin Julio's, Torraine. No, don't get cousin Julio off the couch.
Man, look, they know better than to do that. They can only
And
do
a
that
little
with
and a
us.
little bit like again, I think what Torraine's saying is nothing wrong with it if you bring in some policy with it. We are the culture, so everybody want to dance like us and be like us and love our music and look at Taylor Swift up there swag and surfing and all of that. So again, we don't have to shy away from being the leaders of culture, but again, don't do that and not back it up with actual lead with policy first is what you're saying.
Yeah, you gotta go to. You gotta go to. Even when you go to church, you gotta listen to the sermon before they feed you. So I'm saying you gotta have everything.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So no, you guys hit on it. Obviously, we got a lot to discuss. I hope you guys come back because I want to get into this relationship conversation. I want to get into the immigration conversation. And I just think, an easy way for people to digest stuff is to use metaphors. And I think when we start talking about relationships and dating and black men and black women and, how we see things, it really does translate to how we vote. And our policy. And I think being honest appreciate you guys being honest about that. Like resentment. Yeah, let's just put it on the table. This is where resentment is coming from. And so as long as we are open to hearing each other, hopefully we can move the needle a little bit further down the road. I appreciate my guests for joining me. Georgia, from the great state of Georgia, Nyhiem Wade, president and co-founder of the United Sons and Daughters of Freedmen and the political advocacy group, Be the Power, and Torraine Walker, journalist, brand strategist. Leave, guys, what are your handles so they can follow you guys on Twitter before we get out of here?
Oh, I'm Torraine Walker on Twitter. I'm probably on that way more than I need to be, but that's where you can find me, Torraine Walker. You can also go to my website, torrainewalker.com. You can see my work and check my articles and the things I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is @RealNyhiem, and Nyhiem is spelled NYHIEM, @RealNyhiem.
And you can find me, Tezlyn Figaro, at Tezlyn Figaro on Twitter. But I like to engage more on Instagram, so come holler at me over there as we continue to build this show. This is what you'll get: more very interactive conversation, talking about the real, really having real conversation with a lot of people that you just don't see. I have a pleasure to be in mainstream media. Every day I'm on mainstream media, but this is what's most important to me. And people who know me know that I'll sit up on Twitter space for 10, 12 hours straight, just talking to regular folks. So that's important to me, that I hold pride in that being what's the most important to me, actually touching the grassroots and talking with real people. So thank you guys for joining me on Tap In with Tezlyn Figaro. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace.